Good evening, everyone. It's 7:01, so I think we're going to get started. So good evening and welcome to the November 15th meeting of the Gettysburg Area School District Board of Directors. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct the business of the Gettysburg Area School District. Public comment is welcome, and issues will be referred to the appropriate board committee or administrator. Comments will be summarized in the official board minutes, which will be available by contacting the business office. Please take a moment, if you haven't already, and silence your cell phones or any other electronic devices. Roll call wise, we have everybody here except for President Hassinger and Amy Beth Hodges. Both are excused for family commitments. And with that, if everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and
At this time, before we get started into the meat of the business, we have a couple of presentations and celebrations this evening. The first one will be to recognize our outgoing school board members. And we'll turn things over to Chris.
Thank you. Chris Lay, Assistant Superintendent. I'd like to take a moment to thank our outgoing board members with a certificate of appreciation for the dedicated leadership in public education and continuing service for the students, staff, families, and community of the Gettysburg Area School District. Your hard work, dedication, and achievement will ever be cherished. If you would join me over at the flag, I have a certificate to hand to you, and Becky would like to take a picture. While they're being photographed, Carrie Soliday joined us in February 2017 and is serving till December 6th of 2021, and that's 4 years of service. Kathleen joined us in December of 17 and leaving us after 4 years of service. And Sylvan was appointed and had some interruptions in between, but with a total of 3 years of service on our board. And again, thank you on behalf of the board and the community and our students and our families and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lay. Next, we have a special presentation, and we have a gentleman from the Mason-Dixon line across the Maryland line here with I believe it's called the Any Day Hero recognition, and the Chief of the Hagerstown Fire Department, Mr. Steve Lohr. Chief Lohr is with us here this evening to start things off. Thank you, Steve.
from here, sir.
That'd be fine.
And red means honor. Nope, it's good. Okay. Request permission to drop my mask just long enough to speak. First order of business would be to thank the board for making time out of your busy agenda this evening to allow us to present some special awards. As the chair mentioned, in 1863, I think the Mason-Dixon line represented something quite different. But we want to acknowledge the good work of the people at the Gettysburg High School, this school district, in a truly remarkable story. So I'm going to ask my small delegation to join me down front while I speak, if they would. You'll see rather quickly that Joe Euler, firefighter Joe Euler, Justin Malott, Battalion Chief Russ Grimm, Julie Stotler, and Joel's wife, Jenny, if she'll join him down front, please. On August 12th, Joel was working part-time as an electrician at the Gettysburg High School and received a very high-voltage shock that threw him immediately into cardiac arrest with serious burns. Happily, his brother, co-worker, got him down off of a man lift in the gymnasium, and the staff of the Gettysburg High School had a public access defibrillator and immediately began CPR. Joel was flown to Bayview Medical Center in Baltimore with a severe burn, exit wound in his left palm, and in full cardiac arrest. And you can see some 90 days later, he's back on duty, walking planet Earth, father of 4, loving husband of Jenny, and we couldn't be more proud of all the agencies that participated in that life-saving event. I can tell you I've been doing this in one place or another for over 50 years, and these kind of saves are not very common. They just aren't. And we thought it very important to celebrate the agencies that participated in that day and have allowed us to keep Joel in not only the fire department family, but with his family in Mount Alto. So with that said, if we have a representative from Gettysburg High School here, we'd like to have him down front to receive a special award. That's fine. Each of these awards say the same. They're co-presented by not only the Hagerstown Fire Department, but Justin is the president of our firefighters, Local 1605. They co-sponsored the award, and it starts out with CPR and AED save lives. So we don't know any of you, but we owe all of you because someone had the vision to put a public access defibrillator in the high school, teach their employees CPR, and on any day, I'm sure the folks that come to work that day did not expect to have to do CPR on an electrocuted human being. Successful outcome, we couldn't be more proud. So we jointly present that to the staff of the Gettysburg High School, this Any Day Heroes Award for their efforts in saving the life of firefighter Joe Euler. Chief Grimm, if you'd be kind enough to hand that to folks down front. Next up, Adams County Regional EMS. While we're switching out positions, I must say this organization's been instrumental not only in their duties that day, but in helping set up this award and getting time out of your busy agenda. So we want to thank them personally for that. Same award, we won't take up a great deal of time. Lastly, I think we have a representative from the medical evacuation helicopter system here in Pennsylvania. It's my understanding the employees who were working that day are no longer there, but certainly with everything going on this year, we're just immensely proud that everything come together here. And I think everybody had a role in this save that it's not often duplicated. So with that said, I'm going to ask Justin to co-sponsor the award if he wants to say anything. Going to pass. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask the guy this is all about to just step forward and say a word or two, and then I promise you we'll be out of your hair this evening. Congratulations to the members that are leaving the board. I know that involves a tremendous amount of hard work. Thank you all for having us.
As a man of few words, I'm very thankful. I know I come back right after it happened and talk to the folks at the school.
A little closer to the mic. Thanks.
There we go. Say that as a man of few words, I come back Monday after the accident. I actually talk to the folks at the school and give them thanks, but now it's a much better time to tell you all thankful and that really don't have anything to say, but someone's in a lot more power than me made this all happen at the right time. So I thank you all for being at the right place at the right time to save my life.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Chief Lohr and team, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm sure there's nothing you'd rather be doing than staying for the rest of our school board meeting. But just in case you do have some other things you need to get to, you are welcome to take off at this point. Thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you for your presentation. As we discussed earlier, with all the things that we've been dealing with the last year and a half, 2 years, and the challenges, something like this presentation tonight is really important to celebrate these significant types of things, and it puts things in perspective for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a beautiful school here, by the way. I just wanted to say that. So somebody's doing some really good work here at Gettysburg. Thanks.
Notices and communications? I think we're good there. We have a couple of informational items under CAS 3. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jeanette wants to say something.
Oh, my apologies.
No, that's okay. Good evening, board members. My name is Jeanette Slimmer. I'm the certified school nurse here at Gettysburg Middle School and the head of the Health Services Department. I have a little bit prepared to say, so bear with me, but I talk fast. But again, as Mr. Moyer had mentioned, it's important to celebrate these events when they happen and acknowledge these individuals. Student and staff health and safety have been a popular topic over the past 20 months. While the majority of the focus has been on infection control and pandemic response, I'm pleased to be here tonight to step away from COVID response and highlight one other district-supported health and safety measure that has been in place for several years, but few know about. Medical emergency response teams were established in 2015 when district nurses identified a need for staff assistance during a medical emergency, as well as the need for an organized response should a nurse not be available. When identifying emergency team members, it was essential to not only include teaching and counseling staff, but also building administrators, secretaries, and custodians, as these individuals are often present in the summer, evening, and during community events in our buildings. Members receive CPR, AED, and first aid training, and nurses plan tabletop and live drills. With the support of Dr. Lay, our building administrators, and this training and education has continued annually each summer for our professional and classified staff. Tonight, I have the opportunity to recognize district staff and members of our school medical emergency teams who were involved in 2 significant medical emergency events over recent months. The first event, as you just heard about, occurred on August 12th, when an adult suffered a medical emergency at the high school. The rapid response of the victim's coworkers and high school office staff and administrators, and the immediate use of CPR and the AED, all resulted in the successful resuscitation of this individual before he was handed over to EMS providers. The second event occurred October 6th during the school day when a student experienced a medical emergency leading to cardiac arrest. Again, the quick response of the student's teacher and 2 district nurses who performed CPR and used the AED led to the successful resuscitation of this individual before he was handed over to EMS providers. Several other individuals played a role in the emergency response, from removing students from the classroom, calling 911, and directing EMS. In both of these incidents, the quick actions and courageous efforts of our district staff are the very reason those 2 individuals are with their families today. I want to thank Dr. Lay and our administrators for their ongoing support of this life-saving health and safety initiative. Furthermore, I ask for the district's support in offering CPR and AED training to all district employees. I would like to say this investment has been well worth the return. Tonight, on behalf of the American Heart Association, I'd like to present the Heart Saver Hero Award to the following individuals for their use of CPR and an AED in response to a cardiac event. They will receive a certificate from the American Heart Association along with a letter of commendation. For the August 12th event, Jeremy Lusk, Michael Rupp, and Brenda McDaniel. If they could come forward. For the October 6th event, Karen Morris and Sarah Collars. As I had mentioned previously, this was a team effort, and there are several individuals that supported the emergency response. I would like to recognize Dave Snyder, Kevin Hardy, Jeremy Lusk, Mike Rupp, John Colgan, Stan Lukarowitz, Brenda McDaniel, and Kyle Sokol for their roles in the event on October 6th. And I believe Jill Turner from Adams Regional EMS would like to also address. Thank you.
Good evening. It's extremely rare that we get the opportunity to see the patient follow through. Unfortunately, 90% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests don't survive. So for us to be standing here today with 2 within 3 months shows the great work that your staff are doing. It's absolutely unbelievable. We received emails from the staff that were on our calls the very next day stating how streamlined everything was to be able to get directly to the patient and take care of everything just by the way you guys have your team set up. We just wanted to take the time to recognize the partnership, and without the work of your school district and the staff involved, there could have been 2 very, very different outcomes that day. And we're extremely grateful to be here to be able to congratulate your staff for the hard work. Thank you.
Again, thank you to everyone who was recognized tonight, and thank you for those who came and did the presentations. Very much appreciated. With that, we do have a couple of informational items for the board under 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 having to do with the cash activity, capital projects fund report, and the high school activities account for the first quarter. After that, we have citizens participation. My understanding is no one has requested to address the board this evening, so we'll move into routine approvals. Would anyone on the board like to take any of the agenda items out separately under 5.1, 5.2, 3, 4, and 5? Hearing none, I'm asking for approval or a recommendation to approve the routine approvals.
Sullivan Hershey, so approved.
Second, Tim Sig.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr.
Carrie?
Vice President, yes, this is Carrie Soliday. I do have some questions. And I apologize, Belinda, because I think you're going to end up getting the questions. Under 5.4, there is a broker of record, and in the letters that would engage the broker of record, it looks like the policy term it would be post-dated July 1, 2021. So my question is the district, was there a period where the district was not covered by liability insurance?
Thank you for the question, Carrie. Mrs. Soliday. The entire period will be covered by insurance. It is just that we're changing the broker, which is the main representative. So the underwriters will still stay the same for all the packages that we have. We will probably do when we go do the renewal, we'll check it to different companies that the broker then will have many access to.
Okay. So there was not a period of time where the district was not covered. It's just
No, there is no period of time. This is just, in fact, this could be done at any point in time. It worked out better that to do it right now before the actual renewal period came about.
Thank you. have another question.
Sure.
It's related to, let me make sure I'm in the right section here. The general fund, and there's some pieces, some questions I guess I have. The district is utilizing, it looks like, two different law firms, Apple, Yost, and Z, and then also Barley Snyder. Perhaps that could be explained as to why they're engaging two different law firms.
Yes, Barley and Snyder is our general counsel. Mr. McQuaid will serve in the main focus of the school district's needs, and Apple Z is a special education counsel.
Okay, thank you. Another question related to also the general fund expenditures. There are payments made to a variety of service providers. It could be Abraxas, River Rock, Hoffman Homes, Catholic Charities, Grove City School District, Central IU-10, Central York, Chambersburg. Athletics was kind of large. I'm not sure if that's tied to academics. And then Lancaster School District was another one. So do you know, are all those related to perhaps special ed services, maybe for an academic purpose or maybe for an emotional behavior purpose?
That too, as well as adult alternative education, but they are all outplacement services, basically, that we pay tuition to on behalf of our students attending.
Okay, so we have thank you. And we have a number of students then that are receiving services in placements outside the district related to alternative education.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So the next part's not a question, maybe a statement. I'm sure it's been looked at before, but when you tally up the number, the amount of dollars being spent on alternative education at various agencies, and certainly they all provide something different that meets a need. That's quite a few dollars, and a recommendation might be to look at the trend compared to past years. Along with alternative education, certainly there's been a large investment in mental health support for students, and look to see what the district is spending and how that might be become more efficient with bringing services together, or if there's any way to house them within the district. Thank you for answering my questions.
Mr. Vice President? Kathleen Pratt, I really just want to commend the high school and all related administration and teachers for continuing to offer diverse and robust course offerings. I was really excited to see additional offerings in music, science, and social studies, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I also enjoyed reading the high school's course selection. Very impressive.
Mr. President, Ms. Golden Hershey, I too want to comment on the variety and number of options available. I know we're not the largest district around. Maybe in Adams County we come close, but I don't know in my years of being in education that I've ever seen a district our size offer our students as many options as we do. So I congratulate you and your staff, Mr. Lux.
Thank you, Sylvan. Any other further questions or discussion for the routine approvals? With that, roll call. Sylvan?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes?
Mike?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Timmy? Yes. And I vote yes. Item 6.1, Facilities Improvement Program 5-year plan, negotiate for engineering services. Recommendation for approval.
So moved, Kathleen Pratt.
And second, Carrie Soliday.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none. Roll call. Tim?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes?
Mike?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Timon?
Yes.
Sylvan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Item
Mr. Vice-
6.2, the CIP 5-year plan for James Geddes.
Mr. Vice President? I'd like to make a motion to send 6.2 back to the Finance and Building Committee to go over further.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Yeah, Kathleen Pratt. Why?
Well, we did not discuss it at the last Board and Finance meeting, and it came to the last school board meeting, and I think that it needs further discussion per the cost of the project.
I would agree with that, with having our board president and another member not present this evening, and 2 outgoing board members. I think that would warrant just some further discussion.
Mr. President, Sylvan Hershey, being part of Finance and Facilities, I would agree with that recommendation based on our last meeting and previous meetings.
Any other further discussion on that?
I would like to ask one question, and I'm not sure if it can be answered. This improvement, I don't believe, is directly tied to anything that's pending right now. So it is a project that would be incorporated in the future HVAC renovation. Is that correct? Oh, there you are. I didn't see you behind the podium, so you can answer it.
To answer your question, no, it wasn't something we intended on rolling into that project. We're going to do this separate. Most likely we would have done it as soon as started as soon as the kids let out this summer.
Okay, so there is a bit of time, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. If we want to
take
kick
back to
it,
committee and
yeah, we can
discuss
discuss it further this Thursday. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, since you are here, what typically is the price per square foot for, converting a space in a public institution?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. This scope in particular requires a considerable amount of, we'll call it underground plumbing. So it's not like a typical bathroom in a house, per se. There's a significant amount of underground plumbing, concrete work, and so forth to be done. I don't have a square foot dollar amount. There's a lot of variables associated with that. Most importantly, the access to the work, as well as how they're going to conduct the work. So that's a bit of a wild card.
So they're not using things like PVC pipes. They're going to be using something of a different grade, and I'll use the word grade, a different grade, and then access to the work. What does that mean?
Well, this is located, it's obviously inside the building, but just to get the manpower, material, and equipment into the space, keep the space clean, protect existing finishes. There's a lot more that goes into it rather than just throwing up a few walls and doing some mechanical, electrical, plumbing work. There's other things involved.
Thank you. So if this would go back to the Finance and Facilities Committee, could you bring some of those details along for that discussion that
Sure.
would happen at committee? I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you did say tabling this agenda item would not cause major consternation or any major downside?
No, it will not.
Thank you. Bob, following Robert's rules, we need to vote on the tabling, am I correct?
Well, I didn't hear it table. What I heard was to send it back to committee, and that's something a little different.
My apologies. And we would need to vote on the recommendation from 10 to send back to the policy committee.
That's the motion on the floor, yes.
Tim, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So a vote of yes is that we would send this back to committee. Roll call. Carrie.
Yes?
Mike.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Timon. Yes. Sylvan.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Thank you. Item 6.3, the School Resource Officer Agreement.
This is Carrie Soliday. I move to accept item 6.3, the school resource officer agreement with Cumberland Township.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Discussion?
Mr. Vice President, Kathleen Pratt, I just so I understand, really there are just two changes on this. First, that the work term begins with the first athletic practice and ends 1 week after the last day of school. And secondly, it's about a 4.5-year agreement. Is that right? Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, if I may, I just wanted to acknowledge the negotiation that was a part of this, that they looked to see when the school resource officer was most useful and if there was any downtime that the school resource officer was not needed at the district but may be of value to the township. I thought that was very strategic and wise spending of dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call. Mike?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Timon?
Yes.
Sylvan?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Item 6.4, the independent contractor agreement.
So moved, Kathleen Pratt.
Second, Sylvan Hershey.
Discussion?
Mr. Vice President, I do have questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Carrie Soliday. So with an independent contractor, there needs to be evidence that they have worked with other entities. Was that gathered, or is Gettysburg School District the only entity that this person will be contracting with for the purpose of providing interpretation and translation?
Dr. Lay, would you or one of your designees care to respond?
We have typically utilized the services of our intermediate unit, capital area intermediate unit, but they have not been able to fulfill the requests this year due to shortage of staff. In the past, we have been able to utilize a staff member with scheduling purpose and ways of scheduling so that she could do some of the translations for us, but her schedule does not permit time for that, so because she's directly teaching students. So after we exhausted all of our resources, our Janet Hases, our high school ESL teacher who has been responsible for ESL coordination in a larger school district before she came here, familiarized with the way that they had done services in the past. And we also are outsourcing our support to Lexicate, which is an online provider, and we're using that for meetings and translations, but we need documents transcribed, and the cost for Lexicate well exceeded the cost of this contract services. So through that process, this is where we've arrived.
Thank you. I have some additional questions, and I'm not sure that that one was answered. With a contractor, there is an obligation to prove that they're not an employee, especially in an audit, that they have other sources that they receive income from through perhaps like an LLC or something they've started with. So I think perhaps there may be some more due diligence needed on that part. I'm not sure, or if my question wasn't understood. Can I ask the question, how many languages this particular individual can provide for interpretation and translation?
At this point, all we need for transcription of our documents for IEPs and evaluations are Spanish.
Okay.
So if we needed something outside of that, we would have to go through our Lexicate or the intermediate unit.
That does help to understand what the scope of work would be. In the contract, there's a reference to a division director. It's under number 3. Who's the division director at Gettysburg School District?
For ESL, that's me.
Okay. That might need to be defined in there, but it does seem like you have a handle on that. And is there also in contracts, you often see that there's like a cap on the amount of spending that would go along with this contract. This one appears to be more open-ended. Yes, there's a dollar amount per hour, but is there a cap on what's in, would be an expected total possible billing from this person?
We really have a difficult time doing that, not knowing what the load of work that's going to be needed to be done. We've done some preliminary work to reduce the cost of the language for the templates of the IEPs and our evaluation reports, so to minimize the amount of time we need for the personal information that will be entered. But we are obligated to provide this, so we will have to pay for it and find funds.
So I would recommend including a cap in a contract like this, and then if the amount of time needed for this very specific requirement of translating IEPs and I think that would be special ed evaluations is exceeded, that another contract or addendum could be created to have a handle or cap on the spending, and also that due diligence that this person has work from other agencies besides Gettysburg School District, so they're not confused as an employee of the district for the purposes of an audit or evaluation of district finances. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, Dr. Lee, just to confirm, I was happy to see this, that we're using grant funds to pay this position, correct?
It's not a position, it's a service, but Title III funding for ESL allows us to utilize some funds for translation of information for families, yes.
Listen, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm just glad to hear that we were able to find a resource to do this really important work. You know, we talk about the importance of families being engaged in their children's education, and we do have a substantial number of families for whom English is not spoken in the home. So I'm very, very happy to see that we're going to have this contractor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? With that, roll call. Kathleen?
Yes.
Timon?
Yes.
Sylvan?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Carrie?
No?
Mike?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That wraps up the items that we need to take action on. We have several informational items this evening related to Esser 3 summation, some charter information, and then several policies that we'll take a first look at relative to federal fiscal compliance. And with that, I think I need to turn things over to Dr. Lay.
Actually, we're going to have Belinda present this information.
Good evening, Belinda Wallen, Business Manager. Our first item on the agenda for discussion is the Esser 3 allocation summary. Very similar to the Esser 2. I'm not sure if they're able to put it on the screen. Very similar to the Esser 2 allocation, we are providing examples as to items that we can cover with the funds. Esser 3 appropriation was $5.8 million. Esser 2 was $2.8 million. In general, the list is available for public view, but in summary, I'll just provide an overview of what is different between the two grants. Some things are very similar, some things are being carried through to the grant. For example, a reading specialist, some technology items and some services for family navigators, very similar. True North clinician, mental behavioral health services, SAP services are being also covered, very similar. Some areas that are slightly different. We are having some coordination preparation of high school classroom needs versus the middle school classroom needs. That was in the Esser 2 grant. So we're looking at some furniture equipment to house the high school for further improving the learning environment. Another area we have is the LIU service for autistic support, virtual instruction. That is new above Esser 2. Similarly with Chromebooks, which were offered in the Esser 2, we are adding the addition of Sam's Labs, Troxel, Flex Time Manager, document cameras for K-5, and then also site licenses for an Onshape software program. Moving down in terms of training, we're now coordinating training that is not just in sanitation, which was underneath Esser 3. We are also providing staff development, which is one of the required set-asides underneath the grant. And so, therefore, we're providing that. We are also, in addition to the Esser 2, we're providing tutors, the cost of the program underneath the cyber, which is the GASD cyber. In terms of addressing learning loss, we are looking at the core literacy programs, K-8, Lexia Learning. In the evidence-based activities, we are implementing middle school, high school books, NMH, N8MH Journey Digital Renewal with Mind Play, Math Manipulatives, and also the Rachel's Challenges being offered across the district, mostly middle school, high school. And the other largest item, I think, is what is new to the Esser 3 is some funds towards an HVAC replacement. We are not specifying which replacement at this particular point in time, but we wanted to make sure that in our proposal, we were addressing all the learning items, learning loss, and all the activities surrounding the set-asides first and foremost. And so therefore, we did and accomplished that with all the items above in the list, and then, of course, the HVAC replacement was the last item on the list. Are there any questions with the Esser 3 allocation?
I do have a question, Mr. Vice President, if I may. I do. It's Carrie.
Sure.
Thank you. This it takes quite a bit of effort to figure out how to spend $5.8 million within the parameters of a grant. It's no easy task to pull this together. I do appreciate the effort. I have two questions in particular. In the general fund, we saw a large dollar amount listed for the autistic support. And then there's another piece in this under item F for LIU services for autistic support virtual instruction. When you're looking at the budget process going forward, like that $40,000, that eventually would have to come back to a general fund purchase then, wouldn't it, if this is continued, the autistic support virtual instruction?
That would be correct.
So that's one of those items where at the end of the cliff.
Correct. So for planning purposes, we are evaluating the level of service as we perform it, of course, and then through the budgetary process, we'll determine on the third year, basically the second year now. So it would be 24 cycle budget year that we would determine whether or not this would be added in. The grant period runs to 23, the end of 24, so therefore, the service would be covered through the grant through that period of time.
And certainly we have a need for many very specific services to meet the needs of students who have been identified with exceptionality. So I want to make sure that's clear in like questions previous and the most recent question. Another question I have, and this one may be for Dr. Lay. Under item N in the notes in that column next to the very end there, core literacy program K-8, comma, Lexia Learning. Is the core literacy program Lexia Learning, or are they two separate items?
Those are two separate items.
Okay. So a core literacy program K-8 is being purchased. And does it have a name?
No, we'll be investigating, starting that
Awesome.
process.
I'm thrilled to see that this listed in here. The student achievement data, the achievement gap data has indicated that the core literacy program that's currently in place, it's been in place for quite some time, even previous to when you came to the district, Dr. Lay, and over time, it may have become a little bit more disjointed, not as tight over time, and so looking at a new literacy program core for all students is fantastic, and the dollars are there to invest in that is a fantastic move. Thank you.
Any other questions to entertain for Esser 3?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I do have a question. Thank you. It's regarding item O. It's actually a two-part question. Which HVAC replacement project is this referring to? And then the second part of that question would be, if you're putting $2.127 million towards that project, and it's for the high school project, does that mean that that would be $2 million less that comes out of the general budget?
We were making sure that we were trying to address the high school project in itself from using the bond funds in total. And so the $2.1 million is tentatively slated for the James Getty HVAC project, which is on the horizon. Our goal would be to first and foremost use any of the funds remaining from the high school project towards the next project that is assigned, but having the ability to assign some funds. This is a very approval process is required going through an HVAC project. So it is not, again, these are example items. This is not a necessary guarantee that we're going to be able to obtain. So we need to seek approval from PDE for that specific area. It's in a different level approval process. So while we may be considering, it's not necessarily mean that we're actually going to move forward with the entire fund, portion of these funds using the HVAC project at James Getty.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question. So, since we're able to do the HVAC project in there per the Esser funds, I guess, rules and regs, would that Esser funds not be able to be used for the potential ADA compliant restroom at James Getty as well?
Unfortunately not, because there's certain parameters that are underneath Esser in order to respond underneath, the HV venting, air venting certification, and it is a response to COVID, basically. So very good question though, because there are a lot of questions that are coming out across the state as to what they can cover funds for, but it is specific to say that it needs to be responsive to COVID in terms of heating, venting, air conditioning units. And the likelihood for this amount of funds would be purchasing just the units themselves, so it wouldn't be any other ancillary services.
So Belinda, really good questions, I think, tonight. This, as you have noted up here, this is completely a draft and a proposal at this point. This is pending further work on this fluid proposal, and it would require approval from PDE or the federal educational committees or organizations.
It will go through PDE. They'll have an approval process because it goes through a grant writing. The federal grants is where we'll be filing this, but the Department of Education still has a say in the approval process, because we still need to, whenever we're doing something in terms of an HVAC system, capital projects using Esser funds, there's an approval process that PD has to go through, allow us to do that. And again, it is draft form, so again, it's not a guarantee. At this particular point in time, it's not a guarantee we'll get $5.8 million. This is just the draft in order to file the federal award on obtain the approvals necessary. And likely if we are successful in obtaining the full $5.8 million, it is likely that the project in total may change, file an amended grant, so forth.
The personnel required for this proposal, such as the reading specialist being the big one up there, and I'm not questioning the merits of the reading specialist. When these funds go away, though, how are we looking to deal with that transition when the funds aren't there to support someone long-term?
It's very similar to Dr. Saladay's question. It's one of those items that we will examine as we're developing a budget for that year, which would be the 23-24 school year.
If I remember correctly, the reading specialist who's particularly named in this is a district employee, moved out of the position to serve another role. And I don't know that her reading specialist position was filled. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we didn't.
That's correct.
Yes. Her position, we put a classroom teacher in to serve in the position where the specialist was previously serving so that she can serve all three buildings through the transition of adoption of new programs and implementation. So the intent is that it will happen over the years of service for this grant, and then that position can go back to where she was at the building level.
Any additional questions for Belinda or Dr. Lett? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Onward to the next presentation, which is the charter presentation. So this is really stemming from the question of, has our enrollment changed? If so, how much? And what are we looking at moving forward? Just move quickly through the slides. So the slides will address the enrollment change, the growth in expenditures, and the performance of cyber charters compared to GASD. On the next page, please. So then this page, I'm sorry, the former page. So this represents who all we do business with, per se, in terms of cyber charters. At the very bottom of the list, 2 brick and mortar charters residing in our district is Gettysburg Montessori and Vita Charter School. All the others are cyber programs. Next slide. So in general, since 2016 to 2021, we can see on this side the change in enrollment that has occurred. GASD is the 5th area block and moving from the left on the presentation. Montessori is the 6th, and Vita is the 12th, moving from the left to the right. What this slide will indicate is GASD ourselves, year 2016, we had 2,994 student enrollments. We increased slightly in 2020 to about 3,115, and we are on a decline just a little bit to 2,868 in year 21. On the reverse side of that, our biggest growth, as you could see, is the largest yellow column, of course, is Commonwealth Charter. They went from 9,034 in 2016 to 16,419. And the other, one of the surprising items that we noticed is, some of those that are declining enrollment, while others are increasing enrollment, but some greatly, some not so greatly, some just on an average. But the 3 largest increases are Reach Charter, Insight PA, and of course, Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School. And this just equates us to a bar graph slide of as to how the change of enrollment has occurred over those few years. Next slide, please. Another bar graph that says the top 3, as I mentioned. Apologize, it was 21st century. So Reach Cyber is at 139.85% of an increase since 2016, and then shortly underneath that, Insight PA Charter. If you go to the far, from the right side of the slide in, you can see that the actual enrollment change for Gettysburg, Montessori, Vita, and Gettysburg is listed there on the downward trend versus where all the charters on the upward trend. Next slide, please. This slide, which I think what I wanted to point out most with this slide is this is actual expenditures. Same charter, cyber charters, but Gettysburg has remained pretty consistent with our actual expenditures over the years, which we are the 5th one in, and we went from about 57 million to 63 million over the period of time, whereas Commonwealth Charter was 115 million, now upwards to 166 million in cost. So their costs continue to arise while ours stay pretty consistent in trying to encompass the charter fees. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of our 1920 enrollment, 2021, and our 21-22 enrollments, separating the charters from Vita and Montessori, and then, of course, the total count. Object code 562 is our tuition for cyber charters. So in 1920, rounded 3.8 million. 2021 is right around 5.2 million as we're wrapping up some of the things with the audit. And so while we presently, in 2021-22, seeing a slight decline in some, but there's still an increase over the 1920 school year in terms of enrollment counts for these classes. Next slide. And again, this is the left-hand side is just the variables from our budget, and the bar graph to the right to show how much we have increased tuition over a period of years to our cyber charters. Next slide. Non-special education tuition, which is in terms of regular ed, and our current resident tuition rates are about 12 and 13,000 respectively for any individual who has maybe had once lived in the district and has changed for whatever reason, would still like their child to attend the district. These would be the resident tuition rates that we would charge families as based upon actual expenditures. Likewise, though, as for the regular education for charter tuition, that went from $10,000 up to about $14,000. So that seems to be somewhat comparable to our current tuition rates. But the next slide is more telling in terms of special education rates have far surpassed our rates, which I will go over momentarily. But we began early time frame of 2010 to about $10,000 per student, and now we're paying approximately $30,000 per student who've been identified as special education needs in the charters. The next slide is the special education spend versus pay. So in this particular slide, Gettysburg is average spend of 13.52% of the overall budget, which brings out about spending $19,000 per special education student in our district. Whereas charters, again, we're sending $30,000 per student, and our own services are far less, which is $19,000 per student. Next slide. This is my favorite slide, which I like to share, because not a lot is talked about or known as to how charters are doing in terms and compared to PSSA results. And these results can be pulled on any grade at any level, but we picked third grade on this particular chart. And so what this represents on the far left of the slide, the color portion is Gettysburg. So you can see the green and the green advanced, and the light green is proficient, and compared to the orange, which is basic, and the red below basic. So this would be a snapshot of all third grade students in terms of believe it's math. Yes, math. And so our biggest heat sink of funds, I'll say, was Insight, which is the opposite side of the chart. And as you can see, their green and light green proficient is very small in comparison to the data that represents their below basic and basic PSSA results. So I like to share this information because it does speak volume as to the results that many of the charters are obtaining in terms of PSSAs are not compared to in-school Gettysburg area students. And yet we're paying for a large fair share of enrollment for our regular as well as our special education students. That will conduct the quick review of this charter presentation. Are there any questions on what was shared?
If you could see my jaw drop, that would maybe say enough. But Kathleen Pratt, may I say a few things? Thank you for this information. I feel like we offer a superior product in our schools. And when you compare this last slide, I mean, there's no question that we're superior, and yet we are bleeding out students to charter schools. So I want to say we have an exciting opportunity for public relations. I think there's a lot we can do to really communicate with our families and our community what a truly superior offering we have. Now, of course, I'm off the board, so I won't have anything to do with it, but I will happily be watching for that to come. Thank you.
From a business perspective, it's not necessarily all about the cost. This proves the example that the results of the cost are just not there for our vendors that we pay.
This is Mike Dickerson. Something I would like to add, I've mentioned it before. The last slide is pretty self-explanatory. The academic performance seems to be better, but I think we need to look as a district as to why families are choosing to leave public education and go to charter schools. I think it has to do with environment and different things, and it's not always academic options, but I agree with Al is against charter schools in terms of the cost to drain on the district and taxpayers, but we need to really look at why we're losing students to charters. And as Kathleen mentioned, do some public relations and some things to try and lure them back.
And Belinda, I certainly agree with Kathleen and Mike. And this is an issue I've been beating the drum on for quite some time, and I think we need some help from our friends over in Harrisburg. One of the questions I have, and I don't know if maybe Dr. Lay, Dr. Perrin, or yourself at some point, I'm hearing with our virtual learning, our cyber program here at the school, and there was some proposal for legislation that if schools, public schools in Pennsylvania offered their own, that that parents would have to choose that. But what I'm hearing is, from a competitive standpoint, some of the features of the cyber charters that offer virtual field trips, that offer features where they're Zooming or in Teams in real time, virtually with students, and they're tutoring them and providing extra support. If our program is not comparable to that, then I understand why some people might be choosing that option and so on. I firmly believe that face-to-face instruction is absolutely the best way to go, or a hybrid delivery, which I'm also comfortable with. But it would be nice to see, and again, a side-by-side comparison of the highest enrollment of the cyber charters compared to our program. And also, I think as Dr. Lay leads us through strategic planning over the next, I don't know how many ever months that is going to take. That's a pretty big project. Maybe that can be one of the topics that we talk about there and discuss, and relate it to, Mike, exactly what you're talking about, the environment and the culture, and some of the rationale behind why parents and students are choosing that option, because it really, if it wasn't for the cyber charters, we wouldn't have to increase millage or taxes on our community here. And I could go on and on, but I'll shut up at this point.
Mr. Vice President, this is Carrie Soliday.
Please do.
I want to echo what Mr. Dickerson referenced about gathering information from families who have selected to go with cyber charter options and even charter school options. I believe Dr. Perrin had the former communications director gather info previously, and taking that info along with the new information gathered and comparing it, because that was certainly pre-pandemic, to see what families are saying would be very valuable in making valuable input even to the comprehensive plan that you were referencing, Dr. Moyer. I do have a question. Belinda, it's on slide 7. It has the expenses for each year for the district. 2021 is, the budget amount was 3.9 million, and the actual expenses through April of that year was 4.4 million. I'm rounding a little bit there. This current school year, it was budgeted at the same number as the previous school year. What's our trend looking like right now? From the numbers of those who are now, the increase in numbers, like double the number in cyber charters, are we going to surpass that budgeted amount?
I believe we'll surpass the budget amount, but it's still very early on yet to be totally alarmed, only simply because charters don't always bill a specific month by month, and they also can back bill. For example, one of the charters just recently changed their enrollment numbers from July to October when they sent their invoice over, and it's because they didn't include the new kindergarten enrollment. And so therefore, those invoices can change monthly. And not all of them submit by month. They'll submit a couple months at a time. And so it's kind of hard to say as this particular point in time where we are at for our charter expenses. But with our enrollment at this particular point, just based upon our enrollment, and it's higher than our 1920, and for what we have budgeted, I still think we're going to far exceed what we had planned in the 21-22 budget of 3.9 million.
So where do you pull that money from to pay for that bill? If it's not in that line item budget, do you go back to what is the excess in the reserves to? Yeah,
the unreserved, undesignated fund balance would be utilized to pay the cost.
I have one more question, and you may not know this answer and can bring it back to the board another time. But perhaps this is data also that could impact some decision-making in the strategic plan. Do students stay in the cyber charter option for the full school year? Do they come back and forth in the middle of a school year? You seem to know that answer, yeah.
We do have movement throughout the school year.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion regarding charter? Belinda, thank you.
Thank you.
We have several other informational items, mostly related to federal fiscal compliance. Dr. Lay or Belinda, any remarks related to those or any questions from the board? Hearing none, we'll turn things over to our board committee chairs.
And Mike Dickerson, Policy Committee. Our next Policy Committee will be December 14th at the Administration Building at 4 p.m.
Thank you.
And
Carrie, anything from your end?
Sure. Dr. Moyer, the Adams County Technical Institute Joint Operating Committee will meet this Wednesday, November 17th at 5:30. We will see Dr. Sharon Perry. She will now be the superintendent of record for the Adams County Technical Institute. She was recently appointed or moved from acting to be the full superintendent. So she will be joining us there and continuing on in support. On Thursday, November 18th, the Finance and Facilities Committee meets at 4 p.m. and we will be talking about, I'm sure, the bathroom at James Geddes as well as some other topics.
Thank you, Dr. Soliday, and a big thank you for your leadership on our Facilities and Finance Committee. Dr. Lay, program reports.
Nothing additional at this time. Thank you.
We're good? All righty. The calendar of board events, just a reminder. And it looks like we're anticipating being in the middle school auditorium on December 6th for our annual reorganizational meeting, followed by, I guess we'll have our installation of new board members at that time, and our first meeting December 6th, right following that. Any final remarks from the board?
Mr. President, Sylvan Hershey. First, I'd like to thank the board, the board members who are here this evening for the cooperation that was provided me while asked to do a number of things for the board over the last 3+ years. Appreciated that immensely, and my wife may think of this differently, but I will miss being on the board. I think she's looking at it from another angle, but I'm glad I had the opportunity. I do have some questions based on an article that I read in the Gettysburg Times today about legislation and possible action on homeschooling. Number one, and I'm sort of embarrassed being a board member for 3+ years, I probably should know the answer to this question, but those students of ours, and if nobody can answer this, if you could look it up for me. What activities do we presently provide our homeschooled students in the way of typical high school activities, co-curricular programs that are provided for our students in the buildings? What do we provide our homeschooled students? Does anybody have an answer to that?
Homeschool students are afforded the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities if they are interested.
And that would include such things as field trips?
It's not usually field trips because that's more curricular, so it's extracurricular, which is more of our band, orchestra, music, and sports activities.
Use of facilities?
Use of facilities?
Yeah, could they come in and use the library? Could they come in and be part of a science experiment?
I mean, those things can be considered, but they're not registered students, so we don't typically interact with them with the instructional resources during the day. Now, if we were approached and there's a use opportunity, we wouldn't deny that, but especially with COVID, the last couple of years, we're really cautious about it.
Through everything a curve. Do you have any idea how many students at the elementary level and at the secondary level are being homeschooled in our district?
I'm not in charge of that anymore. Brandy Glenacres is, but I'll say approximately 100 overall. I don't know the breakdown right now, but typically it's around 100.
And does it seem that most of those students are at the secondary level or at the elementary level?
I'd say it's a pretty fair split.
Okay. And has students who are homeschooled in our district, have we ever noticed an expense for those students taking that option rather than coming into school? Because I know parents still pay taxes, they just choose to do homeschooling. And most of my questions are coming from the article that I read. So, Harry, you're still back there. Thank you for putting that in the paper today. I wasn't aware that it was being talked about as seriously, I guess, as that article indicated, that homeschooling is being looked at. And many of the questions I just asked, I think, are going to be considered, or you could read into what I said, are going to be considered for schools to provide homeschooling. So thank you for entertaining that.
Any other remarks from the board?
Yeah, hi, Kathleen Pratt. Actually, I just want to extend a little bit of gratitude. You know, through my 4 years here, I've tried to do that when it's been warranted. And Jeanette Slimmer was here with us earlier, and I just want to give some gratitude to our school nurses. I feel like these are heroes that we can really put on a pedestal. They do so much more than offer a Kleenex to a runny nose. If you go to our website, you'll see a long list of things that our school nurses regularly do, like assess and treat illness and injury, monitor immunizations, provide health education, hearing screening, weight screening. The list goes on and on for what they do. And I think unfortunately through this pandemic, they're not always treated with kindness. So I just want to thank those heroes that are our school nurses and encourage people to thank a school nurse this week. Thank you.
Carrie.
Thank you, Dr. Moyer. I just want to extend a thank you to my fellow board members for the collaboration we've had in many discussions on many topics. I also want to thank the Gettysburg School District administrators for answering my endless questions. I say that with a joke, but at the same time, by answering the questions patiently, you help to educate myself, certainly the board, and the community members. So thank you for answering all those questions. And I'm very honored to have served on the board for 5 years. So thank you also to the community for allowing me that opportunity.
Anyone else? And before we dismiss, again, a big thank you to Kathleen, Sylvan, and Carrie for your great contribution over your tenure on the board. I think I speak for the whole community and the board when I say a big thank you of gratitude, and hopefully others will express that even more as we go forward. With that, we stand adjourned.